Well, I hope you like my story, 'cause it's true. All the years of love and glory that I knew. Chicago, New York, and Las Vegas, Hollywood, Hoboken too. The world out there is my oyster, and I owe it all to you. Now here's to the ladies, always sweet and true. And here's to my buddies, Dean and Sammy too. Let's all have a party.
Saturday night is the loneliest night of the week, 'cause that's the night that my sweetie and I used to dance cheek to cheek. I don't mind Sunday night at all, 'cause that's the night friends come to call, and Monday to Friday go fast, and another week is past.
By the age of 30, Francis Albert Sinatra had hit the heights. Born to Italian immigrant parents, he decided as a teenager to become a singer. A romance with high school sweetheart Nancy Barbado led to a baby, also called Nancy. Sinatra's at-home image of domesticity was at odds with his smooth, sexy baritone voice. Teenage girls played his record until the grooves were worn out. They screamed and screamed. He was on the air in nightclubs and ballrooms, and in the movies.
Until I hear you at the door, until you're in my arms once more. Saturday night is the loneliest night of the week.
As part of the Tommy Dorsey Band, he made appearances in musicals like Las Vegas Nights and Ship Ahoy, and did a brief bit in Reveille with Beverly, singing Night and Day.
Day and night, night and day, under the hide of me, there's an old, such a hungry yearning burning.
But producers considered him a novelty, an extra added attraction. Real acting, movie star stuff, it seemed like a natural. It was just like singing, only you got to use your hands and body to express yourself. Sinatra thought he could make it as an actor in the movies.
Get that out.
The 1940s were dominated by one colossal event, World War II. Everybody had a husband or son or friend in the service, or they were overseas fighting it themselves. Food and gas were rationed. They needed those for the war effort. Kids led rubber and paper drives to recycle for tires and bombs. But in America, the war was a distant thing. There were no air raids or snipers, no goose-stepping Nazis marching up Fifth Avenue. Other than headlines and newsreels and censored airmail from overseas, life went along as it always did. Movies used the war as a plot gimmick. Ghosts on the Loose was a haunted house comedy with the East Side Kids and Bela Lugosi playing a Nazi spy. Sinatra never missed a new horror picture, and this was no exception. The interesting thing about the picture was the female lead, a dark-haired beauty who was engaged to Mickey Rooney at the time. Sinatra liked what he saw. Her name was Ava Gardner. Big movie stars like Jimmy Stewart, Tyrone Power, and Clark Gable volunteered for service along with a few 100,000 less famous guys. Frank Sinatra was a little more patriotic than the average Joe on the street. He knew how lucky he was, knew what chances America offered him in his life and his career. The draft board doctors flunked him. He had a punctured eardrum since birth. It hurt getting classified 4F, unfit for military service. It was considered a man's duty to serve his country. Instead, Sinatra did what he did best, sing. At Bond rallies, he helped raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for the war effort. He volunteered to do what Bob Hope and Martha Raye were doing, to go overseas up to the front lines and entertain the troops. There was a hang-up. Frank's friends and associates came in all colors, religions, and political affiliations. He had no patience for bigotry or political extremists. It was that message that he put across in the movie short, The House I Live In. But there was plenty of bigotry and stupidity before, during, and after the war. Like Father Coughlin, a priest who spewed right-wing messages on the radio. Before the war, aviator Charles Lindbergh flew over to meet Hitler and came back to tell America that Nazi Germany wasn't such a bad place. Beloved mogul Walt Disney fired hundreds of people from his studio when they dared to form a union. He called them communists. That was a good term to bandy about. It scared people. Secret FBI files labeled Sinatra a communist sympathizer. J. Edgar Hoover, boss of the FBI, felt liberalism equaled socialism, and socialism equaled communism. Informants told the FBI that Sinatra was carrying on with women other than his wife, like singer Marilyn Maxwell.
10,000 back for two, but for goodness sake, what does it take? What does it take to get you?
If there was anything J. Edgar Hoover hated worse than a communist homosexual, it was a capitalist heterosexual, particularly one with an Italian name. Sinatra was denied a visa to go overseas and entertain U.S. troops because he might be subversive. It was ridiculous. Sinatra was a liberal Democrat, but he was no communist. One of the most stirring moments in his life was being invited to the White House by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Frank kept FDR's photo on display in his home for the rest of his life.
What is America to me? The house I live in, a plot of earth, a street, the grocer and the butcher, and the people that I meet. That's America to me. Well, I see you around, boys. Bye now.
The image of a skinny guy with a bow tie and the mellifluous voice was irresistible to satire.
Frankie! It's Frankie! It's Frankie! Frankie!
His effect on teenage Bobby Soxers even worked in the barnyard.
Wrong to stay in your arms this way under the starry sky. If it is wrong, then why were you sent to me? Why am I content to be? This is forever.
In Flesh and Blood, the real Sinatra appeared on screen in Higher and Higher, although it wasn't a big stretch. He played himself.
Good morning. My name is Frank Sinatra.
What?
It was his first film on a 7-year contract with RKO Pictures. Not the biggest studio in Hollywood, but they had a reputation for class. His next was Step Lively, a remake of Room Service, which the Marx Brothers made at the studio 6 years earlier. Sinatra actually got good reviews. That was nice. Nicer still was the arrival of a son. Nancy Sinatra gave birth to Franklin Wayne Emanuel Sinatra in January 1944. He was actually named after President Franklin Roosevelt, but he would be known forever as Frank Sinatra Jr. As usual, the proud papa was on the road with a band. The massive D-Day invasion of Europe in June of 1944 was the turning point of the war. The Allied forces pushed the Nazi army back from the occupied lands and wouldn't stop until they pushed the war right down Hitler's throat. Sinatra filmed a musical number that summed it all up.
It'll be a hot time in the town of Berlin when our fighting boys begin to take the joint apart and tear it down when they take old Berlin. They're gonna start a row and show them how we paid the town back in Kokomo. They're gonna take a hike through Hitler's Reich and change that heart to what you know, Joe. There'll be a hot time in the town of Berlin when the lads go marching in. You could never keep them happy down on the farm after they take...
In December of that year, Frank made his final appearance on Your Hit Parade.
Lucky Strike presents Mark Warno and the Lucky Strike Orchestra, the hitters and the singing star of Your Hit Parade, Frank Sinatra.
Sometimes I wonder why I spend the lonely night dreaming of a song. The melody haunts my reverie, and I am once again with you. When our love was...
Sinatra acknowledged his musical debts to the trombone style of Tommy Dorsey and the blues of singer Billie Holiday, but he also emulated the vibrato technique of Dorsey trumpet player Ziggy Elman, and even the violin playing of virtuoso Jascha Heifetz, who could produce amazing variations on a single musical note.
My consolation lies in the stardust of a song. Beside
Consciously and instinctively, Sinatra altered his musical style to differentiate himself from crooners like Bing Crosby.
you were in my arms, the nightingale told its fairy tale of paradise where roses grew. So I dreamed in vain.
The Lucky Strike program, Your Hit Parade, was based on the concept that it was the hit songs rather than the musical artists that audiences wanted to hear. When opera singer Lawrence Tibbett took Sinatra's place as the singer of Your Hit Parade, the ratings dipped noticeably.
The memory of love's refrain. My stardust melody, the memory of love's refrain.
Your Hit Parade was now a part of his past, like the Hoboken Four and the Dorsey Band. Sinatra moved on to other things, like the world's largest movie studio, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer.
And it was said that through those doors passed the most famous stars in Hollywood. Now, some studios can claim they made the finest gangster films or the greatest horror movies. But when it came to musicals, MGM, they were the champions.
His MGM debut would be a lavish color production, two sailors on leave in Hollywood vying for the same girl. Classically trained singer Katherine Grayson would be the girl. Gene Kelly was the lead. Sinatra worked closely with Gene Kelly on the choreography, and although Frank claimed to have two left feet, he picked up the steps pretty quickly. The ailing FDR was re-elected president for an unprecedented fourth four-year term. He had seen America through the Depression and through the war, and now that looked like it was nearly over. 6 months later, he died of a cerebral hemorrhage. 2 weeks after that, as Frank promised in the song, American boys marched into Berlin. The world had a party. Yes, there was still a war in the Pacific, but that could wait. The same month at Mocambo on the Sunset Strip, Sinatra met Ava Gardner. The girl Sinatra had seen in the Bela Lugosi film happened to be under contract at MGM. They saw big things for her. She had been married and divorced from Mickey Rooney, and was then married to bandleader Artie Shaw. Of course, Sinatra was married too, with kids. Somehow, none of that seemed to matter. After VE Day, victory in Europe, Sinatra headed to the front lines to meet the guys in uniform, to sing, to joke with them, to tell them to hurry home. But his trip became a media event, a photo op for the War Department, an excuse for lavish private parties with bigwigs and generals. Sinatra said, nuts. No more newsreel cameras, no more officers' clubs. He was there for the guys who were fighting, not for the brass. These are the only shots of that trip. In the Pacific, the war dragged on. President Harry Truman knew that an invasion of Japan could result in the loss of hundreds of thousands of GIs. He made the decision to use a secret weapon with devastating power. The bomber Enola Gay made its fateful trip over Japan on August 6, 1945. A few minutes later, the city of Hiroshima was obliterated by an atomic bomb. 3 days later, a second nuclear device destroyed Nagasaki. Within a week, Japan surrendered. The war was really over. The very next day, August 15th, MGM released its latest musical, Anchors Aweigh.
Is it my love for you?
The timing was perfect. It was sentimental and lighthearted. Two servicemen rediscovering life in the United States.
Forgotten you all, baby. With a picture of you I've got in my mind, why, even over the phone I can see every...
Producers still looked at Sinatra as a hard person to cast. His looks weren't movie star handsome, gangly in fact, so he played second fiddle to Gene Kelly.
Begged me. True. She pleaded.
Kelly also did a dance duet with Jerry the Mouse, taking a break from the Tom and Jerry cartoons, an intricate combination of animation and live action that predated Roger Rabbit by nearly 50 years.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
La 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 la.
La 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 la.
You see?
I fall in love too easily.
From the heart of a lonely poet came a song for the girl he adored. Though she tried very hard not to show it, she was terribly, terribly bored.
The film was a hit, winning an Oscar for its musical score. At the same Oscar ceremony, Frank Sinatra shared a special Oscar with director Mervyn LeRoy and writer Albert Maltz for The House I Live In, A Mixed Blessing. Maltz was a staunch leftist with many friends in the Communist Party. That wasn't illegal, but the association reflected back on Sinatra. At KFWB Studios in Hollywood, a young hoofer stopped in to say hello to Frank. They had appeared together on the same bill with the Tommy Dorsey Band 5 years ago. Frank gave the young man passes to his radio show. From that moment on, Frankie and Sammy Davis Jr. were friends.
He is the kind of guy that every kid in a neighborhood back east where I come from, like in New York, you had one buddy like this. Sometimes you lost touch with him and you never saw him again. But you always had one guy that you said to yourself in your heart, this is my friend. He is my friend, and he is, to me, one of the nicest human beings I've ever known in my life.
Club dates and recordings took up most of Sinatra's time. In 1946, he recorded 57 songs, including a collection simply titled The Voice. The Voice did a cameo in another all-star musical at MGM, Till the Clouds Roll By, a biography of songwriter Jerome Kern. Sinatra appeared only in the final number singing Old Man River, which he had done memorably in his Hollywood Bowl appearance.
It just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling along. I get weary.
Kern liked the choice of Sinatra for the song. He said, "Frankie, you look like a guy who's tired of living and scared of dying."
But I'm feared of dying, and old man River, he just keeps rolling
Across town at Universal, Ava Gardner was making The Killers, a brutal crime drama that made her an overnight success after 21 films and 6 years in the business. Audiences were starting to notice her the way Sinatra already had.
I was there the night that Ava Gardner was sitting with Jack and Trotta watching Frank Sinatra sing with tears running down her cheek here this way, and Nancy, his wife, was sitting right up front.
It Happened in Brooklyn was fluff, but notable for pairing Sinatra with lovable Jimmy Durante and an English contract player who would become a close pal for 20 years, Peter Lawford.
Hey, that's a very fine chateau. We gotta start rounding up a doll for you.
A doll?
A chick, or as they was known in my youth, a sweet patootie.
I can see a steeple surrounded by people. Oh, how real it all starts to seem. Just as the choir is singing, my alarm starts ringing.
Years later, Sinatra planned a film biography of the Schnauzola's early days in the trio of Clayton, Jackson, and Durante.
I believe in wishing well, and I also believe in a lot of things that Daisy tells.
I believe that your luck will show again if you manage to borrow a rabbit's foot for your pocket change.
Please, Anne, don't go.
But, Danny, it's late. There are 25 school teachers living here, and you don't want them talking about my coming in after midnight, do you?
Oh, of course not.
Good night, Danny. It's been a wonderful evening.
Gee, I guess we're going steady now, huh, hey?
His next RKO film miscast Sinatra. His growing reputation as a woman chaser was at odds with a celibate priest in this inspirational drama. Even worse was its only money, shot in the same year with Groucho Marx and Jane Russell. It was shelved for 3 years, thanks to the absentee management of erratic studio owner Howard Hughes. Sinatra fared a little better in his next picture, The Kissing Bandit. Sinatra considered it the most embarrassing film he'd ever made.
How do you do? I'm terribly sorry. I don't know the horse very long, and I didn't mean to break the furniture. This is a very nice place we've got here.
Yes.
Who's that?
That is the Kissing Bandit.
The Kissing Bandit?
Of course.
A musical comedy twist on the Zorro myth, it fizzled.
If I feel your heart beat, I'll keep it close to mine.
Ann Miller, who had worked with Sinatra in 1943, was brought in for a specialty number to try to liven things up.
Don't scream.
I never scream. What are you doing?
come to take you away with me, to carry you over the border or someplace where we can be together.
You mean you want to abduct me?
Yes, we've dilly-dallied long enough.
Well, I'm not even dressed. Look.
Oh. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I had no idea. Why didn't I kiss her? Fine bandit you are. Would Robin Hood have acted that way? Or Romeo?
In the late 1940s, it was rumored Sinatra flew to Havana to meet expatriate mob kingpin Lucky Luciano, possibly with a bagman carrying a few million dirty dollars. The mobs ruled the island in the 1940s and 50s, aided by the dictator Batista, who skimmed millions for himself. Sinatra's circle of friends was eclectic. Yes, he knew mobsters and presidents. He knew millionaires and bums, geniuses and sports stars, communists and decorated war heroes. He was also a private man in a constant spotlight. What he did and who he did it with was his business. That attitude didn't endear him to the press. His next picture for Metro was old-fashioned fun. Even the songs dated to the turn of the century.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd.
Gene Kelly, Sinatra, and Jules Munchin played vaudevillian ball players, masters of the triple play and triple part hominy.
The guy up at bat hits a terrible clout. The dust clears away and they're both of them out. O'Brien to Ryan to goal.
It wouldn't be the last time Sinatra took an Irish name, like his dad who boxed under the name Marty O'Brien. Producers didn't feel Sinatra had the right look for a leading man, so he again played second banana. Kelly romanced Esther Williams, and Sinatra got comedian Barry Garrett.
Oh, Miss Higgins. Oh, gee. You're the prettiest manager in baseball.
Oh, Eddie, you're certainly the prettiest shortstop.
It's fate, baby, it's fate. And it's knocking at our door.
I have a great fondness for Take Me Out the Ball Game. The period was so great. I was meant to be born in that era. I look better in those costumes than in anything else with the big pompadour and the cinched-in waist. Also, my favorite sequence is when I pick up Frank Sinatra and carry him. And in those days, he weighed about 135 pounds at the most. And they were going to have a double do it. And I said, I can pick him up. And I did. And I did. I picked him up twice. And he was such a delight to work with. I loved him.
Sinatra's high energy on the set could be attributed to his balanced diet, a Coca-Cola and a Mars bar for lunch. And people wondered why he was so thin. Gene Kelly pulled double duty on his next picture with Sinatra, co-directing with Stanley Donen. As in Anchors Away, Sinatra and Kelly were sailors on leave. As in Take Me Out to the Ball Game, the third partner would be Jules Munchin. But unlike any Hollywood musical made before, they would be singing and dancing on real locations, not confined to a back lot.
New York, New York, a wonderful town. The Bronx is up and the Battery's down. The people ride in a hole in the ground. New York, New York, it's a wonderful town. East side, west side, round the city. One day, one night, that's the pity. We won't look ahead, or let the light of dawn get us down. We're really living, Jack, we're going on the town.
I had a ball working with Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra, and they were very nice to me. And when we went to New York, we were all kind of naughty because we all went out after shooting. We were all supposed to be in bed early, and none of us were because we just had fun. I mean, it was like a wonderful party.
It was based on the Broadway musical written by Betty Comden and Adolph Green, with music by Leonard Bernstein. The score won an Oscar for Best Musical Adaptation, though only 4 of the original songs remained in the film version.
As the adding machine once said, you can count on me.
Doing that picture was like having a marvelous time, going to a party. Every time I went on this set, it was like going to a party. We just had fun.
Shooting on top of the Lowe's building was a nightmare for Jules Munchin, who was afraid of heights. Co-director Stanley Donen ended up tying a hidden rope to Munchin's leg to assure him he wouldn't fall. Costuming was a virtual pain in the rear. The costume department made Sinatra wear symmetricals, rubber padding to fill out his thin derriere. That, plus the hairpiece he disliked wearing, took some of the fun out of the filming, although it didn't show on screen.
Frank Sinatra didn't dance either very much, and Gene Kelly worked with them, and I had Gene Kelly, Frank Sinatra, Jules Munchin, and Betty Garrett. Betty Garrett danced. She was good. But they had to learn, he had to teach them how to do this number, and they were behind me, so I figured I had the world's most expensive chorus, but those people backing me up in that number. It was one of the best numbers I ever did.
Smart girls and 3 slick fellas. We're gonna paint it red.
Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen continued to make musicals, modifying and molding this American art form in An American in Paris and Singin' in the Rain. Sinatra would not be with them. This was his last film for MGM.
I'll tell you what happened. This is about 1951, and he was separated from his wife, Nancy, but there'd never been a divorce courts. And I got a tip from Mexico City that Frank and Ava were flying into a remote section of LAX. So we're all down there at this field, and Frank gets off, and he gets into a waiting car, and I remember there was a crippled cameraman, television cameraman, shined a light in his eye, and Frank got very, very mad. So he gets in the car with Ava, and he steps on the gas, and boom, that car comes right at us and pins us right up against the fence. I can still feel the fender. A year later, I was at Romanoff's with Humphrey Bogart, who was a very good friend of Sinatra's. And Sinatra came over and sat down. He turned to me and he says, you know, I was mad that night, but he said, I didn't mean to run you guys down. He says, I want to apologize because when I stepped on the car, I didn't realize the wheels were turned, and before I could straighten them out, I almost hit you. He said, I'm very sorry, and I apologize. So I figure, you know, if a guy's got enough class to apologize, that was it, you know. And we've been friends ever. In fact, I've never seen him anything but Charlie Charm.
Frank's obsessive affair with Ava Gardner ended his marriage to Nancy Sinatra. She never challenged Frank's right to raise their 3 children. There had been something modest about the curly-haired crooner with the skinny frame and bow tie. Now, the balding singer was seen dumping his wife for the Hollywood bombshell. Show business changed in 2 major ways. Congress ordered the movie studios to divest themselves of their owned and operated theater chains. Overnight, studios like MGM and Paramount no longer had guaranteed venues. They also cut back on the number of films they made and the number of stars they kept under contract. An even bigger change was television. It had been around for 20 years, but suddenly, after World War II, it was everywhere. Theater ticket sales reduced to a trickle. Why should you pay for a movie when you could watch television free? TV made bigger stars out of radio stars like Jack Benny.
Well, look, let's congratulate the bride. Yeah, that's a good idea, yeah. Okay. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks very much. Thanks.
Say, Jack, what is this bit they're doing here? Well, you see, at Polish weddings, Frank, you see, they never give gifts. They always give money. See, they send money in envelopes. Say, that's wonderful. Yeah. I think I'll contribute something to the bride. I think that's a wonderful idea. Thank you very much, and good luck to you both.
Thank you very much.
Jack, what about you?
Well, I thought I'd wait till I get home and give them from my own personal stationery. You know what I mean?
With no movie prospects, Frank Sinatra took the plunge. On October 1950, The Frank Sinatra Show appeared on CBS.
Frankie! Happy New Year! Frankie! The doorbell's ringing. No. Doorbell's ringing. Oh, on me. Just a second. What did I tell you guys? Now, if you're going to do this, you got to do it right. You never learn, do you? You got to do this right. Elegance, poise. You see, hold back a little bit. Now, do you understand? Yes, that's it. Now, here we go. Answer the door. There we go.
Thank you very much. You know, several years ago, a small girl sang on one of the radio shows that I was doing, and she amazed the people with her big voice. Well, she's a big girl now, and she still amazes the people. She recently baked a very popular cake, and now she's in the dough. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Eileen Barton.
Gee, Frank, if I'd known you were coming, I'd have baked a pizza.
For those of you squares who don't know what a pizza is, it's an Italian long-playing record. And you use an anchovy as a needle. And if you don't like what's on the record, you eat it. Well, pretty good, huh? Say, Dag, what are you going to do for the folks here at the Paramount, this show?
Well, I thought I would sing a song
Good.
and recite some poetry that I decomposed.
Well, I like good poetry, but let's hear yours.
All right. 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest are 31, except Jack Benny, who's 39.
Jack Benny, 39.
Yes.
I got a big secret for you. I saw his driver's license, and it says good for covered wagons only. Yesterday, I invited Dagmar for lunch between shows at one of the very exclusive restaurants in the theater neighborhood over there. Have a couple of stickers with a few pickles? Sure. Okay.
I'll tell you what I'll have. I'll have a pastrami sandwich.
Sinatra's record sales slowly dipped. Columbia Records A&R man, that means artists and repertoire, was Mitch Miller, who figured in Frank's nursing his voice back to life. Years of cigarettes had taken its toll, but the voice was a full baritone. Deeper, thriftier, the voice of a guy who'd been through the mill. He learned that Columbia Pictures had planned to make From Here to Eternity, a story about Army life in the days before Pearl Harbor. Sinatra wanted the role of Maggio, the tough-talking street punk. Sinatra pleaded with studio boss Harry Cohn to get a crack at the role. Sinatra knew Maggio. He'd grown up with 100 Maggios. He might have become one if things had turned out differently. A loudmouth with more guts than brains, a simple guy with big dreams, a loser. Harry Cohn liked Frank, but this was a major picture. He couldn't take a chance with gimmick casting. The picture needed a real actor in the part, Broadway actor Eli Wallach. Sinatra was a washed-up singer who had made a few musicals, an over-the-hill teen heartthrob. No dice. Sinatra even made a screen test, something expected of beginners, not stars. The test looked good. Ava got into the act, secretly. She knew Harry Cohn's wife and suggested that Frank would be great in the film. Cohn's wife put in the good word. According to modern myth, there was another factor. Supposedly, Sinatra asked another high-ranking individual for help, and that individual leaned on Harry Cohn. In The Godfather, the studio boss wakes up to a horse's head. It makes a good story, but it doesn't wash. If the mob had forced Harry Cohn into hiring Sinatra, Frank would have been paid more than the measly $8,000 he got for the film. The money didn't matter. He would have done it for free. Harry Cohn had wanted a contract player like John Derrick or Aldo Ray in the lead. It'd be cheaper that way. Director Fred Zinnemann wanted Burt Lancaster. He got it. Joan Crawford refused to play opposite Lancaster. That was okay. Zinnemann gave English actress Deborah Kerr a chance to let her hair down playing the passionate housewife. Shelley Winters turned down the role of the Honolulu hooker. Zinnemann cast sweet little Donna Reed. Fatso, the sadistic sergeant, was played by newcomer Ernest Borgnine.
Okay, Fatso, it's killing you want. Come on.
I'll never forget Frank Sinatra, who, when we started the very first scene together, I was playing the piano, and he was trying to dance in that dance, on the little dance floor they had in his club. And I said, well, you dirty little wop, and he came up to me, and I stood up, and he looked up, and he said, my God, he is 10 feet tall. We broke the scene, and we all started to laugh, and I looked at that man, and of course I was just shaking inside, never having worked with this caliber of stars before, Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr and Lord knows, all those wonderful people, and he brought me right down to earth, and I felt so good, From then on, it was a snap.
On location in Hawaii, the whole cast knew they were in something special.
This is Suzanne and Roxanne. Hello there. Would you like to dance, honey?
Hey. Hi. You busy?
Top, she's nothing but trouble. You better keep your mind off what you're thinking. What do you want to do, wind up in Leavenworth?
I never knew it could be like this. Nobody ever kissed me the way you do.
Both Frank and Ava got Oscar nominations for their work in 1953. She for Mogambo, he for From Here to Eternity. She lost, he won. He was back on top.
Well, I hope you like my story, 'cause it's true. All the years of love and glory that I knew. Chicago, New York, and Las Vegas, Hollywood, Hoboken too. The world out there is my oyster, and I owe it all to you. Now here's to the ladies, always sweet and true. And here's to my buddies, Dean and Sammy too. Let's all have a party, great big swinging party. Ring-a-ding, ding-a-ding, ding.